audiences I've ever had. Speaking as an academic, I have two people in the audience that have my last name, which is always friendly. Uh, but yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about photo splicing for open source or for local historical outreach. Um, and so you'll probably see right away that kind of given my affiliation at the university at Albany, I work on content that definitely makes me not a historian. And I'm going to explain that as a part of my presentation today in the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to do principally three things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly explain what I mean by photo splicing. And then secondarily and very briefly, I will talk about my motivation for this, why I'm doing this. Because you see, for example, I work at Homeland Security College at Albany. And I'll try to make some of that clear. But I'm going to spend a lion's share of my time looking at really why photo splicing is helpful for public outreach. And I'll close with some of kind of where this project is going. So, useful starting point to talk about the topic is what is photo splicing. So just very simply what it is it's taking a previously captured picture. It could be a historical image from 10 days ago or 10 years ago or 100 years ago, and taking that image and reproducing it in the same exact place. So the same exact latitude and longitude, the same exact camera angle, so which direction the camera was pointing, and then the elevation of the camera as well. And so when we do this, what we get is something like this. So this is a historical image that is in Oneida. And one thing you'll see is that the demo images that I have for you all today, these are all from Oneida. I'm originally from Oneida, New York. And since this is kind of a professional interest that has a little bit of a personal angle as well, all my pictures are from Oneida. So this particular one is looking down Madison Street in Oneida. It was taken at the turn of the century. You can see the cobblestones there. You can see some what was I believe the Opera House at the time. And there's a bar to the left called the White Elephant. There's a barber pole there as well. So this image, what I did with it is I did this photo splicing that I just mentioned, where I took the So I took the older image and I reproduced a modern image and spliced it in with the old one, and so that you can kind of see the contrast today. For those of you that know Oneida downtown, it's fallen on some pretty hard times, and it's pretty striking, to see the combined image with the modern and the old. See the cobblestone streets and so on, and so. The second part of what I want to talk about today, after kind of showing you what photo splicing is to talk about kind of like why I got into this and why I'm doing this. So I'm a scholar who studies national security and homeland security issues. But in particular, one of the things I do is I'll call it digital detective work. And what I mean by that is I do research that involves kind of what you think of as almost kind of like I said, kind of like digital detective type things. So a recent project that I just did with students is we were trying to take openly available information to try to figure out where the leader of ISIS was located. And this is about maybe 6 to 12 months before he was actually killed. So we're just taking open source information like videos and pictures that were released and other publicly available data, and trying to come up with where he might be based on things like behavioral cues and the social media posts that he had put out. So you can think of it kind of as digital forensics as well. So where photo splicing comes into this is that in the community of people who do this type of digital detective work, there's a real interest in looking at things like photos and videos and trying to figure out where were they taken. So this is an example from a group called Bellingcat, who've been in the news recently because one of the things they do is debunk disinformation by the Russian government and others around the world. And in this case, what they were trying to do is they had an image of an execution, and they were trying to figure out precisely if that execution had occurred, and if it did, when and where. And so that's where the photo splicing part comes in, is we may have an image and we want to try to reproduce it to try to understand if an event occurred, and if the event did occur, what time of day it occurred, and the details surrounding the event. And so I got interested in this as a security studies scholar because I wanted to try to understand these things. And I took photo splicing and I thought, oh, it would be interesting to apply this to local history. And so as I've worked on the project, it really has become clear to me that there are some good reasons for doing that. And, as you all are public historians, I thought I would, share some of these reasons for, kind of beyond making pretty pictures, why someone would go about engaging in photo splicing. So, one of the things that occurred to me when I started this project is just how important place is for people to connect with the past. So, growing up in central New York, I had no idea some of the major events that had occurred here, or even everyday mundane events. And it really was helpful for me to have photos, to use these photos as a way to really help me connect with the past through place. And so I want to provide a tangible example of what I mean here. So, so when it comes to how place matters, one of these ways, especially in a place like upstate New York, is that the place has changed a lot. That initial image that I showed you of photo splicing, I think it kind of brings home the fact that the area has changed quite a bit. And of course, I'm not the first person to do photo splicing. There are other examples of this. In fact, I was really inspired to do some of this partly by photos that I had seen of someone doing the same thing for Detroit. And it was helpful for me to kind of see how the area had changed and to share that with my friends and family. So one example of this is there used to be probably as a lot of you are aware, there used to be electrified trolleys in central New York and probably around the state for that matter. And growing up, I always saw this abutment that's visible in the image, and I'm moving my cursor over now. And I always kind of wondered what that was. My parents had explained it to me. But many years later, when I started working on this project, I came across this photo, and I got interested in trying to understand, okay, well, so where was this taken? And this was taken at an intersection between Dodge and Main Street in Oneida. And I wondered, given what I had learned in digital forensics and type of open source investigation methodologies I was talking about earlier, could I reproduce this photo? Could I reproduce it exactly where it was taken using the types of things I learned for national security and homeland security issues? And so in this presentation, I'm not really going to get into the technical part. I'll talk about, I might do a workshop on that at there's a conference in the fall, I understand, for the wider state. But basically, what I was able to do is find the exact place using the methodologies that I alluded to earlier for digital forensics and open source. And I was able to take that information and reproduce the exact shot today and then photo splice the images. Now, you can see that this is pretty much about as close as you can possibly get to perfectly overlaying the two images. And when I did this, I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is really exciting. For me, it was really exciting. So I wanted to share this through social media. And as I did that, one of the things I saw, to come back to one of my main points here, is that really the splicing helped people understand how the area has changed, and help people who had more of a memory for some of these things, or perhaps had heard of them, to connect to the past. And I saw that in the social media postings. So for example, people were describing the fact that at the end of that image there's some buildings that are no longer there, there was an inn that was there. That's roughly where the urgent care facility is now. And it really helped people connect in a way that I think they wouldn't be able to otherwise, because they could see one for one how the area has changed. Another aspect is that you know, I found through this experience of splicing the photos and putting them on social media that photo splicing can help the public relate at a personal level, especially if you have, it's interesting, if you have people in the images that you splice, it really adds, I think, to help understand how people lived and how life was different. So an example of this is in Oneida, we had a cigar factory called Napoleon's. The building there is still in place, but you can see at the time it employed a lot of people, and they mass manufactured cigars. This is around the 1920s. And so for this picture, I wanted to try to capture, you know, try to draw that connection between the past and the people who lived here, who are now long gone, and today, and how the area has changed. And so this is the modern place where that photo was taken. You know, it's actually of the photos that I've taken, it's one of the areas that has, I would say, changed the least. And when we reproduce the photo, I think like seeing people in it, kind of like the trolley picture as well, seeing the people in it and just seeing like, wow, you know, this occurred here. There was once a factory that employed, I mean, there's probably 40, 50 people in that picture. And that it feels so long gone, but through looking at the photo, you can kind of start to relate. And when I put this on social media, I started to see that type of engagement. You know, so someone say, oh, you know, my great grandmother worked there. And someone starts telling stories, and then someone else starts telling stories. And I think that in this way, these photos help people relate at a personal level as well. Again, through the power of place. So where I want to go with this project is, I talked to Matt a little bit about this. Apparently there are 75-minute skill sessions possible at the conference in the fall that would allow me enough time to be able to really get into how I do this. It is somewhat of a craft, a little bit of art, a little bit of science, but eminently doable. And then lastly, one of the things I want to do is develop some type of, you know, small grant to push out how to teach these materials, potentially put it online based on what I do in the fall. I'll just make another shameless pitch. I understand that I'm getting close to the 15-minute mark. In addition to the work that I've done on photo splicing, I also am really interested in geographic information systems. I will share this PowerPoint, make it available, but there's a link here where basically what I've done is, you know how on Google Maps, if you can click different layers, like you can look at satellite image, or you can look at a regular kind of base street map with the labels of the streets. I've done that, but with historical maps, taken historical maps and overlaid them onto modern maps. And you can turn off different layers for different decades. So again, this is for only Oneida, New York. Other people have done it for other cities. But if you're interested in Oneida maps, this would be your link. Okay. And so just kind of the bottom line before I open it up to Q&A that I want to leave you all with is that, you know, photo splicing, it's really a unique way to draw a connection. And, you know, I'm not a historian, but I think that an important aspect of the outreach here is to help people draw that connection. And I think that these types of photos are one way to do that. So open it up for questions.
Okay, if you got questions, you can either type them in the chat or turn on your mic and feel free to ask questions to Steve.
I've got a question. How do you determine the like camera angle and location and whatnot for the pictures?
Yeah, so there's kind of two different processes that I follow. One is, it's called geolocation, and that is where you kind of make a rough estimate, right? So being that I'm from the area, I kind of have a rough idea where things were taken, but I don't know exactly where they were taken. So that kind of gives me a general idea. And once I've done that, I basically go and I take a lot of photos. and I look really stupid on the side of the road with a camera tripod, taking lots of pictures. My parents have had to watch me do it. But once I've done that, I have a series of kind of rough areas. The harder thing is to determine the camera angle, and I use a tool for that. There's a website called geocalibration.org where you can upload photos, and you can pretty much like identify the rough camera angle. But there is a little bit of figuring, and that's why I said it was a craft. This is the type of content that I would dig deeper to into that 75-minute skill session if I do that in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we got a couple from the chat. Number one, they asked if you could post the Oneida URL. Go back to that page.
Sure.
Number two, what software programs do you use to splice?
You're going to be underwhelmed. So in addition to using geocalibration.org, which is a publicly available website, the other thing that I mainly use is, I use like Adobe Photoshop and PowerPoint. You can do a lot with PowerPoint, just like you can do a lot with Excel. There's just so many different tools, but mainly those I would say, PowerPoint, Adobe Photoshop, and then I use that freely available geocalibration.org. And you don't have to, I'll kind of add that you don't have to do a perfect overlay. I mean, I'm trying to get it as close as I possibly can. I think it's possible that, this can be conceived as overkill. But I think that it does kind of add something the closer you can make it. The closer the overlap comes together, I think the easier it is for people to say, wow, this is something really interesting that I'm looking at.
Dr. Coulthart, I have a question. And that would be also, it seems like another possible use of this technology is to explain some colloquialisms. For instance, if you go back to that picture of the trolley, once upon a time, where that hotel is that you showed off in the distance was called the Head of Maine, and some people who are of a certain age and older still refer to that part as the Head of Maine. Now, that was because Main Street teed right into the Seneca Turnpike, or Route 5. As a result, though, when Route 46 was punched through, obviously there was no longer a Head of Maine. But if you hear some local terms used like that, for instance, the Bear Path out near Munsville Stockbridge, or Five Corners between Wampsville and Oneida, this helps people understand better the local lore, if you will. So thank you for listening to me, Professor Coulthart.
That's a good point. I think that these conversations kind of go a long way to explaining things, especially for someone who's younger that maybe doesn't have a good sense of what has happened in their community. To be able to actually point and say, no, like there was once something here that is no longer here, or the area has changed in a dramatic way, definitely.
And you could barely tell the pride in that question right there. So we had one more question. Have you ever tried to, I know some of our historians do like self-guided walking tours where you can tag into a QR code. Have you ever tried to link some of these images to something like that, where maybe people see an image of Napoleon's and they can take their phone out and look and see what you did?
Yeah. Well, I haven't done anything like that, specifically like that. I mean, I have thought about trying to combine it with some of the work I've done on maps. But Matt, are you able to see the image of the map right now? Yeah. Or are you still back at the PowerPoint?
We're still on the PowerPoint.
You're still on the PowerPoint?
Oneida historic maps.
All right.
Click on the link. Well, let's see. No.
So can you see it now?
Yeah, now we got it.
Yeah. So this is the map app. This is a separate project that I've worked on. I thought about doing little like call out boxes. So for example, that picture from Napoleon's, it's right about here. We're looking at the 1875 map. We can turn this off and look at the modern map. And so like this is about the time roughly about the time that that photo was taken, facing this kind of facade right here. One of the things I've talked, kind of thought about is like, well, I could take the photo splices that I have and put them like in a little like pin right here, and then people could click on it and then they could see, okay, oh, this is where this image is, and it might help them relate a little bit instead of just looking at the map. But I do think that that comment about combining it with a walking tour sounds fantastic. I mean, I think that's quite interesting.
Any other questions? All right. With that, I think we'll turn off the recording for this. Steve, thanks for coming. We really do appreciate it. And we will be working on getting you in the conference. We just had our there's a couple of board members in here. So we just had our kind of first try to figure out what we're going to do next year. So hopefully that comes into mind next year when we start to figure this out. So again, Steve, thanks for stopping in and talking with us. We greatly appreciate it. And for anyone else that wants to stay and have a chat for a few minutes, we can do that. And if you got to go, you got to go. So thank you again. We hope to talk to you all soon. And